Good evening. I'm Justin Chang, film critic at the Los Angeles Times. Welcome to week one of the Ultimate Summer Movie Showdown, the LA Times series where you get to choose the greatest summer movies of all time, or at least since 1975, the summer a little movie called Jaws changed Hollywood history forever. This is a project I've been working on with other writers and editors on the LA Times movie team. With theaters closed and major Hollywood releases being held back due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we asked ourselves, what if instead of having the worst summer movie season ever, we put our heads together and came up with the ultimate summer movie season, singling out the best movies from each week of release, going back to 1975. And because summer movie season is all about epic matchups based on release dates, we decided to be similarly arbitrary about it and do this on a week by week basis based on release dates of movies. So this is how it's going to work. Each week for 16 weeks, we are pulling together some of the best or most memorable big movies from each week of release and letting you, LA Times readers, Twitter voters, and everyone in between, vote for your favorites in a series of head-to-head contests posted on my Twitter account. We held our first round of voting last week for movies that were released between May 1st and May 7th, between the years 1975 and 2019. You voted, and your ultimate summer movie showdown champion for week one is The Avengers, the Disney Marvel blockbuster. You maybe have heard of it. That was released in theaters on May 4th, 2012. The Avengers beat out such other popular Marvel titles that were also released in that time frame, including Iron Man, Captain America Civil War, as well as other movies like 16 Candles, Dragon the Bruce Lee Story, Dave, and Much Ado About Nothing. The Avengers was directed by Joss Whedon and brought together a mega cast of superheroes, some of whom had already appeared in their own solo Marvel adventures, such as Robert Downey Jr., of course, as Iron Man, Chris Evans as Captain America, Chris Hemsworth as Thor. It also introduced Mark Ruffalo as the Incredible Hulk, Dr. Bruce Banner, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, and Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. And of course, spearheading the Avengers, Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, director of the international peacekeeping agency known as SHIELD. Tonight, I will be talking about the Avengers with my colleague and friend, awards columnist and critic Glenn Whipp. And then we will be answering some questions from readers. If you have a question, you can send it to me on Twitter. My account is at Justin C. Chang, or you can share it in the comments section of the Times Classic Hollywood page on Facebook. And so let's get this discussion started. I would like to welcome to the Ultimate Summer Movie Showdown live chat, Glenn Whipp. Hello, Glenn.
Hi, Justin.
Hi there. How are you doing?
I'm feeling just like a little sense of we should be doing Groundhog Day right now instead of the Avengers, but I'm not sure if anyone will even get that reference, but you and I will, and that's anyway. I am doing great, and it's good to see you again. It's been too long, and I'm excited. I am just happy that you started this summer movie madness countdown because it has provided me countless minutes, hours of time spent on Twitter looking at these polls, thinking, what are people thinking, and wishing that my favorite movie might win. And I think there's some good news for week two on that front. But week one, not a bad choice either. I kind of expected choice.
Yeah, it is an expected choice. This is, in our top two vote getters from week one, it was interesting. It was The Avengers, which won, of course, and the runner-up was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002. It's kind of like we're seeing two different eras of Marvel in a way. And that one, of course, falls outside of the designated Marvel Cinematic Universe. It predates the MCU, and the character of Spider-Man, of course, due to various rights issues and conflicts, which are just too tedious to get into right now. But it was kind of inevitable, given just how popular, how ubiquitous these movies are, and how ubiquitous comic book superhero movies have become in Hollywood. It was inevitable that I'm sorry, but Much Ado About Nothing just didn't stand a chance. And it's kind of funny. Kenneth Branagh directed that movie and directed Thor, which we ultimately left out of our sweepstakes because we dropped. It's worth noting we dropped Thor, we dropped Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3. All of those movies were also released between May 1st and May 7th in their respective years. Clearly, the first week of May is a popular one for the MCU. It's almost like I imagine they like to, they release their movies at different points throughout the year, but it's like they're almost laying ownership to the summer before it's just as it's getting started.
Right. They're establishing the benchmark right away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it we and this movie wasn't our first choice perhaps, but it is the first choice of our readers. I think it opens up a fascinating discussion regardless about critical taste, popular taste. Is there a difference between these two things? I actually tend to think not so much as people like to think that there is, but I think it's a discussion worth diving into, and about some of the comforts of franchise cinema and the frustrations of franchise cinema as well. I certainly liked the Avengers well enough when it came out back in 2012. I had not seen the movie again since then, so I rewatched it and found it, somewhat less thrilling, although certainly still a very well put together, well mounted. For a movie that's as long as it is, it more or less zips by. What did you think rewatching the movie again after 8 years?
Yeah. I mean, because I had not seen it since 2012 because I've been busy watching the factory produce more movies. I mean, 2017, 2018, 2019, there have been three Marvel movies each of those years. There have been countless other superhero movies to dive into, to pay attention to ignore, and watch on airplanes later on. But so this was the first time I had seen it since 2012. And, I have a 17-year-old son who devours these movies. I was asking him, I mean, you want to watch it again with me? And then that opened a conversation like, well, Sean, I mean, do you think like when you're a dad, are, are you going to just like sit your kids down and watch the Marvel movies with them, from the first one to the last? And God knows how many there will be by then. Maybe there just won't be enough time. And he was like, I don't know. But then he kind of took the question like, Dad, are you asking me to watch all the Marvel movies with you? And he was like kind of asking it hopefully. And I was, nah, we'll have to see how long this quarantine lasts before we get into that place. But it was fun to watch it again. You and I wrote a piece together, and I was saying because there have been three every year, and we've gone a whole year without seeing a Marvel movie, so it wasn't like there was no fatigue. It was like, yeah, sure, I'll watch a Marvel movie,
Yeah.
and it was pretty good. You know, I was joking with you that I was going to bring a like a chart, a bar graph charting your sort of ambivalent to the movie as the week went along. But and the thing that you wrote that made me laugh and gave me pause a little bit was I was celebrating the competence of this movie, which was not a given. There had been five Marvel movies before this of varying quality, and here was this one that was going to bring them all together. And would it work? Would it not work? And it ended up working. It ended up working. Let's just say that it brought all these characters together in a pretty seamless way, integrating them all into the story, giving us, I think, one of the better Marvel villains with Loki, giving all of the Avengers good moments with Loki. Um, it's a pretty enjoyable movie, and when you think about all of the superhero movies and all the blockbuster movies that don't work, um, that's cause for some celebration. But I mean, the thing that was like making me laugh was just like, yay for competence.
Yes.
And that's a pretty low bar, isn't it? But
Yeah.
that
It's
that is the Marvel franchise, isn't it? It's very competent, very, you know what you're going to get, and for the most part, it's going to be a pretty good movie.
Yeah, it's like we should, and as you say, competence is not something to be taken for granted. It's also something that shouldn't be confused for greatness. I mean, these are basically, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, they are, the meat and potatoes of Hollywood these days. And something you said about just how many of them are released each year, three, sometimes two, but a year, like clockwork. And there is a clockwork precision to these movies. And it's both kind of impressive and kind of annoying because you feel as though sometimes, even when the movie is delivering and really, it's not aspiring to anything greater than that. And I'm not saying that they all have to, but you feel, and it varies. It varies depending on the characters. Of course, it depends on which of these characters and which of these subplots you gravitate toward. But I will say the thing that is, I think, impressive about the Avengers, and the reason people retain their affection for this one, even though, of course, there have been 17 other Marvel movies since then, is that this is the movie that sort of brought everything together. It was sort of the fulfillment, the realization of the original vision. And I think it was quite an improvement on the movies that had come before, like Thor and Captain America, the first Avenger, which I personally found them both really erratic and dull. I mean, I liked Iron Man. I think this is, for better or worse, Robert Downey Jr.'s signature role. It's just such a good fit for his ability to fire off sardonic one-liners at rapid fire speed. So, and watching Joss Whedon put this all together and infuse it with his signature wit, his pop culture savvy, there was this sense of momentum, of convergence, this sense of like, okay, here is this kind of amazing narrative machinery that is finally firing on all cylinders, and everything is integrated. So there's something kind of cool about that. I think it feels less exciting to revisit, 8 years later, because there have been 17 more movies since, and so it really, it seemed formulaic then. It seems even more formulaic now. It feels like an assembly line, which kind of brings new meaning to the expression Avengers assemble. But but
Yeah,
there are bright spots. Tom Hiddleston is
yeah,
one of them. The actors
yeah.
are the bright spots in this movie, and it's weird because they're all sort of, they play off very nicely against each other, and they do have a nice chemistry. But it feels like everything is sort of just controlled to within an inch of its life, and I find that sort of chokes the life out of them. I also just feel, watching this movie again, is it weird to you, Glenn, that these movies, which are basically, they fit a lot of different genres. They're comic book movies. They are comedies, and I think the comedy is one of the aspects that works the best and the most consistently. But they're also, first and foremost, perhaps they're action movies. And does it
Mm.
sort of bother you that the action in a lot of these movies, with exceptions, and we'll get to the exceptions soon enough, the action is just not really that great in these films? It feels as if they haven't, they taken a lot of care into various
Yeah.
other aspects of world building, various other aspects of structure. But the action just kind of, there are some cool moments, but it just kind of dissipates. It feels weightless. It's completely bloodless, which, yeah, PG-13 rating, I get. But does that bother you a little bit?
Well, that was an interesting thing about watching the Avengers again, this movie, in that it opens with this action sequence, and it's Loki uh, going to the Shield base, and where he finds a number of secondary characters, Nick Fury among them. He'd object to being called a secondary character, but and it's it's not very good. The opening of this movie kind of is bad. It's this action sequence, the stakes. I mean, it's hard to really care about what's going on, and you really wonder, well, where it's a really strange setup, and what they're doing is setting up Loki taking the the case, and that puts the plot into motion. But in terms of an action sequence, it's not very well shot. It's not particularly good. And I think I mean, that's the criticism of most Marvel movies is that visually they're not particularly interesting. They're kind of drab. I mean, for all of the grief that George Lucas's prequels, Star Wars prequels got, and deservedly so. Um, Visually, they were always kind of interesting. Amid all the boring dialogue and endless exposition, over in the corners of the frames, there was always something kind of interesting going on. He had a real visual sense. That's largely absent in these Marvel movies, with exceptions, and we celebrate those exceptions.
It's such a good point, Glenn, because it's almost as if the Marvel movies reverse exactly that equation that you describe. The action feels pretty indifferently, shot or whatnot, but it is the character interplay and the dialogue that you sort of lean in toward and that you perhaps most enjoy from these movies. Whereas certainly in George Lucas's Star Wars prequels, the character interplay is just deadly dull and stilted. So it's like,
Yeah.
if we were to somehow reconcile these two polar extremes, we would have the perfect action movie. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
like mentally, I still have like this block about Marvel movies. Like the last 30 or 40 minutes is just going to be this overlong, big action, bang, bang, clang, clang. And sometimes watching these movies, I just check out. And that's not good, obviously. So watching this Avengers movie again, I thought the last 30 minutes or so, the big action set piece was actually pretty well done. It's one of the better last 30 minutes. It is a 30-minute action sequence with Midtown Manhattan being destroyed, or at least pretty much destroyed, and and Bruce Banner showing up on the vintage motorcycle, and Hulk smashing things very enjoyably. I mean, I think that's the one thing I guess as we were talking about the Avengers and writing about it was we seem to have a mutual appreciation for Mark Ruffalo and the Bruce Banner character, and and these two warring egos he's trying to reconcile them. And I just love the Ruffalo. Watching this again, I loved his introduction, and I love the performance because Ruffalo's kind of an unlikely person to find in this type of movie. And he approaches the character's conflict with kind of a knowing sense of humor that's really enjoyable to watch.
He's just such a wonderful actor, and I think in some ways it's all the more impressive because he had the toughest job in the sense of playing a very iconic character himself. But the Hulk has been a problematic, a difficult character for Marvel to wrangle, and I think that says something, given that they are very good at wrangling just about every aspect and of this enterprise and just pummeling everything into submission. They haven't been able to do that with the Hulk. I mean, I think they found their way, and it's kind of, I'm not saying that I want another one of these movies, Glenn, but I wouldn't mind seeing Mark Ruffalo's standalone Hulk movie, which I know I was reading, for a long time, due again to very tedious character rights issues. They were not able to. That just wasn't going to happen, and I believe, and I'm sure there will be, Marvel scholars correcting me to tell me that if I'm mischaracterizing any of this or getting details wrong, which I'm definitely want to do. But I understand that it's not, the door is perhaps open on that possibility. And I would definitely watch Ruffalo in one of these movies. He brings a groundedness. He is just a very unassuming actor, which is the kind of actor you want playing the Hulk. This was a character who was played, of course, in two previous movies, both whatever their merits, perceived as disappointments. He was played by Eric Bana in Ang Lee's Hulk. He was played by Edward Norton in The Incredible Hulk, and so this movie just kind of launched. Okay, here is Ruffalo as the Hulk, and he kind of just picked it up and just carried it and ran with it. And he is. I especially liked his scenes here because when Iron Man and Captain America and Thor are in a room, and the movie just becomes like this giant frat house comedy where the frat house is this shield aircraft, watercraft, whatever the hell it is. And there it's just this epic trash talking contest between these three guys, and you can just the testosterone is clearly just it's frankly rather stifling. And Ruffalo's there. He's just kind of the most unassuming guy, and yet he is the one, of course, who could just
Right.
is the most dangerous
Right.
one. So there is this cool tension there, and I think it is to the good of the series and of the story as well.
Yeah, that was, I think, rewatching my favorite sequence was on that craft where Ruffalo is kind of on the edges there and he's just kind of being quiet. There is a tension
Yeah.
that you don't really see often in these movies um, because it's a very subtle, quiet tension that he is just trying to keep it all together. I still don't understand why at the end of the movie he shows up and then suddenly Hulk can control like his rage and who he's directing it toward. That's for the Marvel scholars, I guess, to enlighten. But it was
That's exactly
enjoyable.
right.
Both aspects were enjoyable. But I really did dig those early scenes with Ruffalo on the water airship, um, where he's just like, it was great.
He's really good in those, and yeah, and I think it speaks to the Hulk embodies or symbolizes the loss of control, when rage and pure
Mm,
a sort of agent of pure chaos. And that is something that is, I think, antithetical to the
right.
ethos of Marvel. So I think there's I don't know if this I'm sure that there is and I know fans of Ang Lee's Hulk will want to quarrel with me because that movie has also been sort of rediscovered and reclaimed as a misunderstood great superhero movie. I'm not actually, it's been too long for me, I don't know where I stand on that argument, but I think it speaks to just how that's why he's problematic for this series, and it's also why he's one of the more interesting guys to have around. And my favorite moment in these movies still is certainly of this movie is you can find that clip on YouTube of Hulk hoist Loki saying, "I am a god, you dull creature," and Hulk kind of hoists him up and just like a rag doll and just smashes him over and over again on the ground. And and that is the action highlight of this movie for me. In a movie where
Right.
I personally tend to, the action is a blur, but that scene, it stands out. It feels personal to me. So in a way that I wish these movies had a little bit more of. Although every one of these movies usually has like one or two of those really good,
Yeah.
those where you feel like that was maybe worth paying to watch this.
Right. I mean, I guess the one downside to the format that you've established here, the summer movie madness, is that the best Marvel movie didn't come out in the summer. It came out in the spring, and that's Black Panther, and that is the movie that has all the things that we have been lamenting here. It has the visual, Ryan Coogler's visual style. It has the greatest Marvel villain, maybe the greatest Marvel character, in Eric Killmonger, and who embodies that sort of loss of control. Although, I mean, he has a plan and he's very um, dedicated toward it, and that's the interesting thing about it. That sort of conflict between Killmonger and T'Challa, but um, it's that's the movie that I think we had a lot of readers asking, well, what's our favorite Marvel movie, or what would we like to see from Marvel movies? And it's pretty much all there in Black Panther, which we're talking about now because we won't be able to talk about it during this summer series.
Yes, it's a shame. I like to think that that would have, it would depend on the competition, but I would like to think that
Mm,
Black Panther might have, trounced the Avengers, certainly. And that's a movie that really, in a way that a lot of these movies are not doing, I feel like Black Panther is really grounded and really in conversation with what is going on in the world. And it is a
right,
movie that is
right,
that you could just see from the outcry, not the outcry, the embrace of this movie and the complexity of what it's doing. And I think that says something because I think, if I can correct what I said, it's like actually these movies are in conversation with what's going on because these movies are basically war movies. There's a very militaristic sensibility at play in these films, regardless of whether you like them or not. And again, I like my fair share of them. And this is what kind of does give me pause, maybe a little bit about
mm,
that final sequence in particular. And this isn't the most egregious example. I mean, if you look at the rival to Marvel DC Comics movies like Man of Steel and Justice League, and in terms of action, the action there is even more bloated, more turgid. But even in something like the Avengers at the end, you see just this battle leveling huge chunks of Manhattan, and just the death toll has to be staggering, and it's the action is bloodless. The comic banter just persists relentlessly. I know this is escapist entertainment, but it's always hard for me to watch some of those scenes. And I know, I don't know, I'm sure anybody listening to this might say, oh, just, whatever, just, you're supposed to turn your brain off. I don't know if I can completely. I mean, it kind of pulls
mm,
me out a little bit, maybe more than a little
mm.
bit even. I think it's a little
Yeah,
appalling. And
yeah,
just, if it were just if it, I think it's just because we see that all the time. If it were once in a while, I might, have weirdly have more of a tolerance for it. But I think it's just that kind of apocalyptic blowout. Um, it's just hard, it just we see it too often.
yeah.
It'll be but
And I
you
could
know
be unfair. I mean, I said that, it seems like every Marvel movie ends with that apocalyptic blowout. And I'm sure there are exceptions, but just in my, I mean, that's that's the thing about these movies. I mean, there's 23, so they all just and you say they are of a piece, so they are in conversation with each other, and so they all start to kind of blend together into this formula. And yeah, you check out, and I think some of the checking out is also a defense mechanism against you're not particularly enjoying what you're seeing. It's a little bit offensive to your soul, you know. Um, but again, it is these scenes are so bloodless that they're not scarring you in a way that the great movies would, where they would just sort of like make you think about what you're seeing, make you think about humanity, make you think about the destruction. Um, they're just it's yeah, it kind of goes on, and then you're waiting for the mid credits and end credits tags.
yeah,
And just okay, I'm gonna stay for these. It'll give me a little something to smile about, or or as you said earlier, something to puzzle over with someone
yeah,
who knows what's going on.
yeah. And of course,
Um,
it's just yeah. Go ahead, please.
no, 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 no. Go ahead.
I was
Yeah.
going to say, yeah, this kind of one apocalypse after another, and of course building to many movies from this one in Avengers Infinity War, when half the world is sort of course wiped out with a snap of a finger, and so which turned out to be the ultimate, whether you think of it as a stunning, brilliant reversal or just a narrative cheat or whatnot, where that you know the past can be rewritten to some extent and time can be turned and the dead can be brought back. So it's yeah, this movie, these are movies that are sort of very much toying with sort of the metaphysics of death and of war. And so and it's like, and again, it's I'm not even I don't want to, and I don't want to think too hard about this, Glenn. I already feel like I'm thinking too hard, so maybe we should just leave this here. because I'm, going to be,
But
and I think,
yeah,
yeah.
we're not supposed to think too hard about most summer movies.
We do.
Although I think there are going to be some great exceptions as the summer moves along. But like I said at the outset, this gives us both a little diversion. We're looking for diversions right now. I mean, our jobs have changed quite a bit. I mean, you are normally you're going to screenings. What have you been doing the past
Yeah.
couple of months? How has your life changed as a film critic?
Yeah. It's changed in some ways. It's changed in a lot of ways. My God, all of our lives have changed, and our work has changed, of course. I work from home most of the time already, so that didn't change too much. Except now my family is home too, and we're all trying to work and get things done and get used to new setups and everything. I feel like I've watched the same number of movies. Of course, I'm not seeing, I'm not going to screenings. I'm watching a lot more older films as I can on Criterion Channel, which is one of the best platforms out there. And I do recommend anyone paying attention, please, if you can subscribe to Criterion Channel. It's a great platform. Just wonderful classic Hollywood cinema, classic foreign language cinema. Just it's well worth the investment. Um, but yeah, I've actually been trying to keep better track. I don't know if you do this, Glenn. I didn't, but I've been doing it now, keeping track of my viewing. I used to keep a viewer log like maybe decades ago, and I gave up on it just because I got lazy. And here I figured, well, this is a good time to revive it and actually track how many movies I've been watching. I think I average about 16 a month, which is okay. I could
Yeah.
do better. But yeah, how about you? How have things changed?
Um, yeah. It just working. I mean, it makes me laugh because yeah, I mean, we work from home a lot, but now we are working from home with our families. My wife is a school teacher, and she's just like, your life really hasn't changed at all. You're still just sitting on the couch with your laptop, writing and watching things. And while her work has just radically changed because she's not in the classroom anymore. But I mean, it's been a nice opportunity. I mentioned my son earlier. I have been taking the this opportunity to kind of introduce him to like my favorite movies and mixing in some that I think he my favorite movies that I think he would like. So we've watched Coen Brothers movies like Fargo, Big Lebowski. We've watched There Will Be Blood. Trying to
Right.
introduce him to starter films from the great film from my favorite filmmakers, and mixing in a little Die Hard and kind of action movies. Um, Doing a little programming here at the Whip household, and that's been enjoyable. But man, yeah, I mean, we did that piece earlier. Just can't wait to get back out and
Yeah.
see a movie with hundreds of other people. I don't know when that's going to be, but for me, it can't be soon enough. What
Same here.
so as
Go
we
ahead.
as we as we march through this summer movie showdown, what is the movie that you want to see prevail? What's your favorite summer movie? Do you have one that's dear to your heart?
Yes, I do. I don't know if this is the best of all time, but I would be thrilled to see it prevail in its week, which I think is a very competitive week. But I am going to say my favorite summer movie is Speed. The
Nice.
wonderful and still just fantastic action thriller starring Keanu Reeves, Sandra Bullock, and the late great Dennis Hopper. Just a great LA movie, a great transit movie. So my wife's an urban planner, so it's just that's another thing that I love about it. A great just LA landscape layout movie. And there are just and
It,
I think it's incredibly romantic as well as kinetic. There are scenes in this movie that I actually do just kind of replay over and over again, even if it's just the clips on YouTube. If I need, I don't know, an adrenaline burst, or I need to
wow.
wake myself up while I'm writing because I'm boring myself to tears, I'll just throw that on, and it works great. I've never seen it in a movie theater, and my God, if I ever got the chance, I mean, needless to say, we'll both be thrilled when movie theaters open. I will watch anything in a theater once once I can. But if I get the chance to see this on the big screen, I would take it in a heartbeat. Yeah.
That's interesting to hear you say that, because I was going to ask you if your choice of Speed was related to an experience that you had in a theater, or how you saw it, or some
Yeah.
memories of seeing it. Because I mean, great movie. I love Speed too, but it's not necessarily what I would pick as like, you know, the typical greatest. You know, it's not going to show up on a ton of lists. So, but no, you saw it like on
Yeah,
TV.
I did
How
actually,
did you
because
see
I
it?
mean, and not to give my age, I mean, I was like 11 years old when that movie came out, and I could have
Mm.
gone to see it in the theater. I was also a pretty squeamish kid. Now I'm sort of just a squeamish adult, but that movie was a lot to take for an 11, at least for an 11-year-old of my constitution. So I think I didn't see it in theaters, but I heard, everyone was raving about it. Family members had seen it and loved it, and I watched it on, VHS, good old VHS, and just had a complete blast with it. So, and again, I watched it again, I think last year or the year before, and it just holds up quite beautifully. So, um, but yeah,
I'm
well,
putting that one up next for my son. That's the
good.
next one we're gonna watch. He hasn't seen that one. It's a great one.
Hope he enjoys it. Well, Glenn, let's go back to the Avengers really quickly, and then we're going to go to our readers. I think we have some reader questions.
Yeah.
We sort of talked about this already. We talked about how much we like Mark Ruffalo, but are there any other standouts in this whole MCU for you?
Mm.
And if it's no, that's totally fine, because they all kind of blur together for me. But
Well,
I think there are
yeah,
some
yeah.
really good actors. Yeah, but please,
No, I mentioned Michael B. Jordan and Eric Killmonger
fantastic.
earlier, so that's probably my favorite, just because the villain to me was the hero of that movie. In some sense, or in every sense, which made it such an interesting viewing experience. I was also thinking, as we were doing this, about the 23 movies, and then what a kind of breath of fresh air that the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie was.
Mm,
Kind of arrived at a time when we needed some new Marvel characters, and we needed kind of a standalone that had a real sense of humor about it, a playfulness, and that was a movie that had just a host of really well-defined, fun characters. And yeah, I mean, I that was the movie, as I was thinking about the 23, other than Black Panther, and there are certainly um, I love Doctor Strange. Um, the Taika Waititi Thor is enjoyable too. Um, but yeah, probably the Guardians movie. And again, so many of these summer movies, these Marvel movies, are kind of tied to the experience. And I had a really good time seeing that movie with both of my kids. They
absolutely. And I would
responded
just
to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think just visually what Guardians of the
Yeah.
Galaxy does and what Doctor Strange does as well, just there's there's an inventiveness in the visuals of those movies that feels like it's not just cleaving to the usual house style. There's a trippiness, there's a surrealism to the visuals of those movies that is very, very welcome. So that's great. And, we have a lot of questions, which we won't get to all of them, but I'm looking through my email and my Twitter right now. We have a question from reader Ali Blair. What makes a good MCU movie? What do you look for in order to give it a good review? And these questions are for me and Glenn. Um, Glenn, do you have an answer to this, or do you want me to take it? Or
I love how
I
you
have.
passed it over to me. I mean, I think we've talked about this, quite a bit. The ones, and you just mentioned, and you're absolutely right about the visual style, the interesting visual style of Doctor Strange, and at least the first Guardians movie. Um, Anything that kind of starts to take us away from that factory formula, um, and we're responding to uh, story and characters. And so, yeah, I mean, with me, Black Panther, because of the stakes, and you didn't have necessarily always that sense of there's something at stake in these things. It was more kind of moving the pieces into place to get to the next chapter. Um, and a great villain helps too, which is why I really did enjoy this Avengers movie because Tom Hiddleston is so good.
He really is. I would just really quickly say that, to me, what makes a good MCU movie is not really that much different from what makes a good movie, period. I mean, I'm not holding it, I think, to some really different or loftier standard. I'm looking for well-drawn characters, well-directed action scenes, well-directed dialogue scenes, which are sometimes even harder to do. And you're looking for some measure of unpredictability, which is a hard thing to pull off, I think, when you have these movies locked into this very rigid narrative blueprint. So, but I think the good ones have managed to transcend that one, like Black Panther, like Doctor Strange. Which I know we're not alone in admiring those two, perhaps a little bit higher than some of the others. We have some questions, two questions that I think are actually kind of dovetailed. One, Sarah Nusleen, and what cultural influences do you think we'll see more of in the coming years of superhero films? And a similar question, which I'll from Shannon O'Connor: what hurdles would you like to see the MCU films jump next? I think hurdles and cultural influences, I think, are both something we can package together because I think diversity and I think representation and cultural influence. I don't like to think of them as a hurdle, but I think that it does pose this question, this obstacle for every for Hollywood movies of all kinds, and especially these. And the MCU movies, like them or dislike them, have absolutely been catalysts for change in that department. There's something to be said very much for seeing actors who look like people of color, or seeing more women at the fore of these. And I think that in general they've done better with actors of color than they have with women. Although one of the postponed movies from this year, of course, from the summer, is Black Widow, starring Scarlett Johansson. So that one will be very much worth seeing. I hope. We hope. We live in eternal hope. There's The Eternals, directed by Chloe Zhao, which will feature, Gemma Chan and Kumail Nanjiani, Brian Tyree Henry, playing, I believe, the first LGBT superhero in an MCU movie. There's the new Shang-Chi movie starring Simu Liu. So there's something to look forward to, I think, in terms of cultural influences, in terms of the hurdles that they'll cross over, and hopefully that will, whether the movies are good or bad, hopefully that will create some meaningful differences. Another question from Clay Bryce on Twitter. When about to begin a review, how do you know how to start it? What is your approach? I'm having a hard time doing so in my film class at school. I love questions like this. These are general film review process questions. Glenn, do you have a process?
I think you want to start it better than the Avengers started. You don't want to start it with a drab action sequence where no one really cares or knows what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I don't think reviews are necessarily any different in writing those than writing any piece of than writing any story. I mean, your job as a writer is to grab the reader and to make them really want to read what you have to say moving forward. So um, with a review, I mean, there's just so many different ways you can do that. You can kind of set a scene. You can start with a provocative take. I'm not going to say a hot take, just let's say an informed take. And but you want to establish. I mean, you want to establish interest right away, and why why should the reader read on? Why should they care what you think? Uh, I don't know. What do you think, Justin? It's such a
Yeah,
big
I agree.
question, and
It's
it
a big
really
question.
varies. And there's so
Yeah,
many ways to do it.
it really does vary, and I want this questioner to get a good grade in their film class. So I would say something that maybe I do a lot and maybe overuse, but I think it's just because it's just a very handy device to have, is what you said, the scene setting lead, in a way.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's just helpful for my benefit, whether I end up using that way in or scrapping it all together. It's like, I don't, it's hard to, you don't want to start with a topic sentence or something. It's hard to, my goal is just find my way into the movie. And a lot of time that is best accomplished with writing about a scene that stood out to you. And that is not just important in terms of the plot or whatnot, but that actually, maybe there's something of visual interest going on. Maybe there's something about it that has some ideas that are, explored in the movie. There's something kind of representative or symbolic, emblematic about that scene. I think that is helpful. So I would say that if you're having the writer's block, just think about what stuck out to you about the movie best, and it can be something. It can be an actor. It can be something about an actor's face, something about their expression, something about the clothes they're wearing. It's like it's good to sort of sometimes focus on physical details because, of course, this is a visual medium we're writing about, and you want to you know, write about it in a way that engages the visual quality of the medium. So, we have one more question from Brian Symington on the Facebook page. As movie reviewers, how often do you rewatch movies at all? A good question. All the time, or try to. You also want to see, you also want to watch all the stuff that you haven't seen. And there's even as people who make their living by watching movies, there's so much we haven't seen. Glenn, do you feel the same way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is, I mean, especially right now when we're not allowed to really go outside and do a whole lot, um, we find ourselves with just this chasm of time that's easy to fritter away. But it's also just this opportunity to either dive into things that we've watched before and find comfort in. It's also a time to explore things that we haven't seen that we know we should have, or just things that we've heard about and want to explore. And yeah, it's I finding that balance is sometimes hard. I think right now what we're going through is kind of wanting to. I think for a lot of people, maybe are watching. They have that Disney Plus subscription, and maybe there are a lot of people making their way through the 23 Marvel movies right now as a way of getting through this time. And if you are finding pleasure in that, I say hats off. Keep on.
Absolutely. And Glenn, I am reassured by the great wall of physical media behind you. It looks like you are all set, even if
Yeah,
internet connections fail us, the cloud fails us. You will be set. I hope.
yeah.
I
I have
hope I
my
will be
yeah
too.
portable generator and the DVD players hooked up, and yeah, I'm ready to go.
We are. Well, I think we have contributed enough Marvel discourse to the world for one night. So I would like to thank you, Glenn, for being the most eloquent and convivial of co-hosts. Thank you. Thank you to our Times readers for voting on these movies. Thank you for watching the Avengers this past week and sharing your questions if you did on Twitter and Facebook. I will keep those comments coming. And I wanted to say too, give our viewers a little taste of what is to come. This is, of course, just week one of the Ultimate Summer Movie Showdown. Here is what is ahead for week two. Now, this week two covers movies that were released between May 8th and 14th. It was a very competitive week with movies, as you can see, like Friday the 13th, The Natural, Short Circuit, The Crow, Twister, which came pretty close, and the 2009 Star Trek. But in the end, this came down to two movies: Luc Besson's delirious 1997 sci-fi extravaganza The Fifth Element, starring Bruce Willis and Mila Jovovich, and Paul Feig's hilarious 2011 comedy Bridesmaids, starring and co-written by Kristen Wiig. The voting between these two movies was neck and neck pretty much the whole way, but in the end, there could only be one winner, and that winner was Bridesmaids. Yes, good voting, everyone. I think Bridesmaids came away with like 50.4% of the vote. So a very, very close call. Fifth Element fans have nothing to be ashamed of. So yeah, I'm really excited to be talking about Bridesmaids next week, a week from today, same time, 6 p.m. right here. And I look forward to being with you then. Thank you for being with us. Good night.